There's a beautiful sefer called Migdal Oiz. We have mentioned it in the past. It's actually this one that I'm holding right now in my hands. And this came out a few decades ago in honor of Rabbi Azriel Zelik Slonim, Oiz, Azriel Zelik. He was one of the greatest Lubavitcher Chassidim of our generation. He was actually still by the Rebbe Rashab, by the 5th Rebbe of Lubavitch, and by the 6th, by the Fiedike Rebbe, by the previous Rebbe. And he traveled the world already in the 20s and the 30s. For the previous Rebbe, he went to Australia, he was originally from Eretz Yisrael, from Yerushalayim, a very, very interesting chassid. In honor of him, after he passed away, unfortunately, they gave out a sefer, beautiful sefer that had a lot of historical artifacts connected to Chassidus in general and Chassidus Chabad. And one area is called Sha'ar HaMaaseh. They have unbelievable stories that he wrote, that he heard from Chassidim, and also stories that older Chassidim wrote from previous generations. And one of the cute little stories, which has to do with our shiur of today, we're going to be discussing the Rambam, the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad. There's a story here about Reb Meir Primishlan. Reb Meir Primishlan was in the first generation of Chassidus, in the time of the Alter Rebbe, in the time of the first Rebbe. This was 2 generations after the Baal Shem Tov. And Reb Shlomo Kluger, who was also one of the greatest Rabbanim of that time, he wrote many Sfarim. Reb Shlomo Kluger had to pass by the city of Primishlan. Reb Meir Primishlan was known as a big tzaddik, but also as someone who likes to talk a lot. And Reb Shlomo Kluger didn't have enough time to spend with Reb Meir, but he knew he had to spend some time with him because it's a pasnish, it's not nice to just come by in town and leave. So he decided what he's going to do is he will meet Reb Meir Primishlan in the morning, when Reb Meir is on his way to the mikveh or back from the mikveh before davening. So this way he won't have to spend more than a half hour with him, and it's done. He comes to Primishlan. In the morning he meets Reb Meir when he's coming back from the mikveh. So Reb Meir sees Reb Shlomo, oh, Shalom Aleichem. And Reb Meir tells Reb Shlomo Kluger as follows. When Meirel geht mit dem Pantoffel in mikveh, when Meirel, he always used to talk about himself, he used to say Meirel. He never said ich, he said Meirel. So he said, when Meirel geht mit dem Pantoffel, when he goes with his slippers to the mikveh, on the way he passes by the Mesivta Derakia, he passes by the yeshiva up in heaven. And he says, and this morning there was an unbelievable tumult in the Mesivta Derakia. There was a tumult, that's a giton. What happened? They were learning, and all of a sudden they saw that the Rambam says something which is Heipech HaGemara Mefureshes, the opposite of a clear Gemara. So Stutzach HaTumul, the Rambam against the Gemara, what does that mean? So the whole yeshiva is going on wheels, trying to find a teretz, find an answer. So Meir Primishlan tells Reb Shlomo Kluger, no, Meirel kann doch nicht lernen. Meirel does not learn. But Reb Shlomo knows how to learn. Maybe Reb Shlomo has an answer to the question. So meanwhile, so they're talking, so they walk towards the house, walk into the house, and Reb Meirel tells Reb Shlomo, no, you know what, let's take out the Gemara, so they take out a Gemara, takes out the Rambam, takes out a few Sfarim, and Reb Shlomo Kluger has a psashtikal answer, and he tells Reb Meir the answer. So Reb Meir tells him as follows, yeah, in the Mesivta Derakia Take, somebody tried to give this answer, but they refuted it. So you have to find a different teretz. And Reb Shlomo asked, how did they slug it up? And he explained to him how. So Reb Shlomo said, yeah, you're right, Taka, it's a pretty good way how to refute. So Reb Meir says, meanwhile Reb Meir started putting on his talis and tefillin, and Reb Shlomo finally found a second teretz, another answer. And he says, yeah, Reb Meir says, yeah, in the Mesivta Derakia they said this answer too, but they refuted it. Third answer, nothing worked. So finally, Reb Shlomo turns to Reb Meir Primishlan, no. And do you know if they said a teretz? And Reb Meir said, yeah. Azevi Meir went by the Mesivta Derakia and Agreise Kasha. So therefore, they brought out the Rambam himself. They asked the Rambam, so let him say an answer. And the Rambam gave a tirutz ha'amiti. He gave the real answer. He gave a truthful answer. And that answer you can't refute was a perfect answer. When Reb Shlomo Kluger left Primishlan, he told his Talmidim, look, whether Reb Meir Primishlan was up in Mesivta Derakia and heard this from the Rambam, that I can't tell you. But one thing is sure, that the only one who can say such an answer is the Rambam himself. That was the bottom line. So we see here that the Chassidus and the Rambam have a very, very strong connections. There are a lot of very interesting stories that happened during the time of the Baal Shem Tov, the Talmidei HaMagid, the Talmidei of the Alter Rebbe's times. Those days, there are countless stories that happened with the Rambam, with these great tzaddikim. And in Mirza Hashem, we will have a shir about the Rambam, we will discuss it. Today we're going to go more to discuss the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe, especially because now in the month of Teves, we're going to be encountering both Yahrzeits, both days of passing. The Rambam passed away on Chav, on the 20th day of Teves. The Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad, passed away on the 24th day of Teves, Chav Dalet Teves, which they are very much in proximity to each other. And the Parsha is usually also the same Parsha, and there are a lot of things which make them connected. This year especially is 200 years from the passing of the Alter Rebbe. I remember when I was a little boy, that when I was growing up, we were still under the influence of the 200 years from the Baal Shem Tov. In the year Tov Chaf, about 30, almost 50 years ago, a little over 50 years ago, there was 200 years from the Histalkus of the Baal Shem Tov, the 200 years of the passing from the Baal Shem Tov. And the Rebbe made a very, very big tumult about it, that they should discuss a lot the Baal Shem Tov, especially with the 200 years. So of course, when it comes to 200 years of the Alter Rebbe, there is no question that we have to make a big shturim, as you say in Yiddish, about it. So therefore, what we're going to do today is start a series to discuss this, and we're going to start discussing the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe, their similarities, and this is going to be the first of a series. One of the things that makes them unique, the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe, every single author, tzaddik, posek, was known for his line that he was into. Let's take, for example, Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was in the time of the Gemara. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai said many things in Shas, in the Gemara, in the Talmud, but Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai was mainly known for his Sefer HaZohar, for Pnimius HaTorah, for the secrets of Torah. Although he wrote many other things in Nigla, the Torah, in the revealed part of Torah, but we don't see that we make such a big tumult out of those. He's considered like the other Tanaim of the Mishnah. But when it comes to Pnimius HaTorah, that was Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai's line. And this is with most of the tzaddikim in the generations. Each one was known for the line that he was into. What we find a common denominator by the Alter Rebbe and the Rambam, that both were in both lines. There's a part of Torah which is called Nigla the Torah, the revealed part of Torah. There's a part of Torah which is called Pnimius HaTorah, as we will discuss soon, the esoteric part of Torah, where it discusses the secrets of Torah, the Pnimius of Torah. And both the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe, both were in both lines almost equally. And this is what we're going to see now, not only in their Torah, but also in their lifestyle, how they conducted themselves. So, and this is a Sikha, which is in Likutei Sichos, volume Chav Vav, volume 26, pages 26 through page 39, and obviously other places in Likutei Sichos. So let's go now straight to our sources, and we're going to find some amazing things which make a common denominator between the two, and what we can learn from that, etc. So let's first start with a story. If you look at your source number 1, this is a story with the previous Rebbe, said in the summer of Toshin, in the summer of 1940. This was the first year that the previous Rebbe was here in America. On page 111. So the previous Rebbe related the following story. Source number 1. Pam ba echad migdoilei hamisnagdim. Came one of the greatest of the misnagdim during the first 3 generations of Hasidus Chabad, which is the Alter Rebbe, the Mittel Rebbe, the Tzemach Tzedek, the first, second, and third Rebbe. The Rebbe of our generation is the 7th. These were the first 3. There were still some who were called the Misnagdim, those who opposed Chassidus, and they meant it L'Shem Shamayim to a certain extent. And of course, by the time of the Tzemach Tzedek, the concept of Chassidus was already so widely explained and spread that there were no longer Misnagdim. But this was still in the time of the Tzemach Tzedek, when from the last Misnagdim were still around. And one of these Misnagdim, and he asked a question to the Tzemach Tzedek. What was his question? He said as follows: Ziknechem agoin, your grandfather, the Goin, your grandfather the genius, which is the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad. Hine bechol mokim ve'inyan hu mevias lashon Rambam. Wherever you turn around, you look in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, you look in Tanya, you look in all the Sfarim of the Alter Rebbe, you see that he follows the Rambam's way of writing and thinking. And in most Psukim, in most rulings of Halacha and Gemara, he goes in the Shitta, he goes in the line of the Rambam. So I have a question, says this Misnagid. What is it? And why is it that when it comes to the three types of souls that there are in a person, the Rambam says that the three nefesh that there are in a person, the first one he calls Teves, which means the natural nefesh, chiyunis, the vital nefesh, and sichlis, the intellectual nefesh. These are the three nefeshes. However, the Alter Rebbe in Tanya doesn't go that way. The Alter Rebbe has a different way. How does the Alter Rebbe call them? Chiyunis, the vital one, sichlis, the intellectual one, ve'elekis, and the godly one. What did he do with the natural one? So we see over here, I'm not going to go now through the whole answer because this is not part of our shir to discuss the nefesh of the person, but we see over here that even the greatest of the Misnagdim, they learned the Torah of the Alter Rebbe, and they saw that the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe go together to the extent that they even learned the esoteric part that talks about the nefesh, and they were able to saw this difference. And the previous Rebbe said the story of the Tzemach Tzedek, how he explained that question. But the bottom line is that we see that in those days it was so obvious that the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe go on the same line. So let's go to the first issue, which they are a common denominator. They're passing away. The day of the Histalkus, the day that the Rambam passed away, was Chaf Teves, the 20th day of the month of Teves. The Alter Rebbe was on the 24th of Teves, 4 days later. How do we see it? There's a sefer called Shem HaGdolim. The one who wrote it, his name was the Chidah. The Chidah, Reb Chaim Yosef David Azulai, he was born in Eretz Yisrael about 250 years ago, a little before the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe of Chabad. He was like sort of a contemporary of the Baal Shem Tov, let's say, in that time, and a little bit later. And then from Eretz Yisrael, he traveled a lot, and then he ended up in Italy, in Livorno, and that's where he passed away. He wrote an unbelievable amount of Sfarim, I think 50 or 60 Sfarim he wrote, and he was a Talmud of Reb Chaim Ben Attar, the Rechaim HaKodesh, etc. And he, besides for the Sfarim of Torah that he wrote, he also wrote a beautiful diary and his travels, and he read a lot, and he saw a lot. Unbelievable. So one of the things that he writes in his Shem HaGdolim, he writes about the Rambam. And he says that the Rambam, look at source number 2, the Rambam Nistalik, when did he pass away? Leil Beis the Shabbos, on a Sunday night, Chaf Teves, on the 20th day of the month of Teves. When did Alter Rebbe pass away? Look in your source number 3. This is taken from the Sefer HaYom Yom, a book that was authored by the Rebbe, which is a sort of like a calendar, and for every single day of the year there is a gishmak vort for that day and what happened on that day in history, which is relevant to us. And in the day of Chav Dalet Teves, what does the Alter Rebbe write? Source number 3, Histalkus ad Murazokin, the passing of the Alter Rebbe, Bikfar Piena, in a village called Piena. When was that? B'Motzoi Shabbos Kodesh Parshios Shmos Tov Kuf Ein Gimel. On Motzoi Shabbos of Parshios Shmos, Chav Dalet Teves, in the year Tov Kuf Ein Gimel, which is 200 years from this year that we are in now. By the way, there's an interesting sefer called Tzemach David, which is the sefer which I'm holding right now in my hands. And this sefer Tzemach David was written by a Talmud of the Ramon. He was a Talmud of the Maharal, the Maharal MiPrague, the famous Maharal MiPrague. And he writes that the Rambam passed away on Chav Dalet Teves, the same day as the Alter Rebbe. Now, it turned out that it is a mistake. It was not Chav Dalet, it was Chav, because the place where he writes it from, over there it says that it was Chav. So it's obvious that it wasn't Chav Dalet. But it's an interesting Hashgacha Pratis that there is even an opinion that the Rambam passed away on Chav Dalet, although it turned out not necessarily correct, but it's very interesting that such a thing happened. So bottom line is, they passed away in proximity. The second thing we're going to see is how the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe, their type of avodah, the type of conduct, the way they wanted to help Yidden, they both helped Yidden begashmius and beruchnius. They were into the welfare of Yidden, not only the spiritual, but also Pashat Begashmias on a material level to help them in their material way. Let's look first about the Rambam. Source number 4. The Rambam was known, besides for the Sfarim that he wrote, Yada Chazaka and Mernevuchim, etc., he also wrote very famous letters to the Yidden. The Yidden in Taimon, the Yidden in other places, and these letters, 2 of them which stand out, there are actually 3 big ones, but 2 that stand out, one is called the Igeres Taimon, and one is called the Igeres Hashmad. Igeres Taimon, which is the letter to Taimon to Yemen, also has another name, Pesach Tikva, the city, they took it also as a name, but the letter that he sent to Taimon was more a Pesach Tikva, which means something that gives hope, because the people were so oppressed, as we're going to see in a moment, the quote, and the second, so in a material level, and the second one was Igeres Hashmad, the letter that had to do with Shmad, that Chas v'Shalom, the word wanted to force Yidden that they should convert to other religions, and this letter, Igeres Hashmad, has also another name, which is Maimer Kiddush Hashem, which again we see that it's more on a spiritual level, what the Rambam was sending them and giving them support and courage to keep on going. And as you see in quote number 4, what was the purpose of these letters? That was to raise the morale of the Yidden on a material level and a physical level, and in the spiritual level, to bring back Yidden closer to the Rebbe and to his Torah on a spiritual level. Or in the exact words of the Rambam, lechazik yodayim rafos, to strengthen hands that are becoming very weak, ule'ametz birkaim koshles, and to give more strength to knees, to feet that are falling. And this was basically what the Rambam was trying to do. Besides all the Sfarim that he wrote, just to give Yidden the koyach, begashmis and beruchnis on a material level and on a spiritual level. And we find the same thing with the Alter Rebbe. Look at source number 5. In the back of the Sefer of Tanya, there is a very short biography of the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe. And what does it say there? In the Rosh Prakim, in the short biography of the Toldos Admor HaZaken, of the life story of the Alter Rebbe in the back of the Tanya, it says as follows: Bishnas Tov Kufchav Chasunasei. In the year 520, in the Jewish year 1520, he got married, the Alter Rebbe. Right after he got married, he had a big nadan, he had a big dowry. He makes a very big campaign with his own efforts and with his money. Parshios, he got people physically jobs, and he gave them land that they should be able to plow and seed and get parnasa. And there's a whole sefer called Sefer HaToldos of the Alter Rebbe, the history of the Alter Rebbe. The way the previous Rebbe describes beautifully was a whole thing of how they got the whole colonias. It was a whole area, etc. So that was Pashat Begashmias, how he helped Yidden with his own money. And then, on a spiritual level, Mekabel HaMagidus B'Liyozne. He became the Magid of Liyozne after the Baal Shem Tov had passed away, and the Magid had passed away, and the Mendel Haradoker, who was one of the greatest Talmidim of the Magid, moved to Eretz Yisrael. The Alter Rebbe is the one who took the Magidus in Liyozne, the concept of giving over Torah. In addition to that, look at source number 6 in Likutei Diburim, in the Sichos, in the discourses of the previous Rebbe, on page Tafshin Nun Hey. The previous Rebbe mentions over there in the name of the previous Rabbeim, the Rebbe. By the way, when the Rabbeim would say the Rebbe, it meant the Alter Rebbe, the first Rebbe. It says the Rebbe hat gemacht Tausender und größer Tausender Baalei Tshuva. The Alter Rebbe made thousands and many thousands of Baalei Tshuva. Now, I have to make a disclaimer here that the term Baal Tshuva today is used in a wrong format. Today, when a Jew, yesterday he didn't know about Torah, and today he finds out about Torah, they call him a Baal Tshuva. That is not correct. That's not a Baal Tshuva. A Baal Tshuva means someone who knows what Torah is. For whatever reason, he veers off a little bit, or he doesn't do today what he's supposed to, and tomorrow he realizes that he went off a little, and he comes back. That is a Baal Tshuva. And in practice, every single person, every single day is a Baal Tshuva, should be a Baal Tshuva. because every day we have to be further than we were yesterday. If today we are the same as yesterday, then tomorrow we have to do tshuva for that. So every single person really is a Baal tshuva. And this is really what the Alter Rebbe was doing. He wasn't, besides for the fact that obviously if there were Yidden who were far from Yiddishkeit because they didn't have the opportunity to learn, that he brought them back to their roots, but that's not the Baal tshuva that we're talking about. We're talking the Alter Rebbe made a revolution in the religious world, explaining how everyone has to do tshuva. And this is how we put everyone in the right track. So we see here the concept of helping Yidden begashmius on the physical level and beruchnius, pashat in spiritual level. A third thing that we find is, as we mentioned before briefly, but now we're going to see it in the sources, that both wrote Torah in Nigla the Torah, in the revealed part of Torah, and in Nistar, and also in the hidden part of Torah. As we discussed in many shiurim, many times what the Zohar says. The Zohar says that the Torah is just like a body and a soul. The bodies we see, the soul we don't see. The neshama is something which is hidden, we don't see. But we know that the neshama is spiritual and unlimited. So too in Torah. Torah has the body, which is the revealed part of Torah, and the soul of Torah. And the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe discussed both. How do we see it? There's a pasuk in Torah, if you look at source number 7 in Parshios Nitzavim, the pasuk says, "Nistar is Lashem Elokeinu." There are the hidden things which are connected with Hashem Elokeinu, which are connected to the Eibishter, Nigla, and the ones that are revealed, Lanu Vonenu. That's the one that we see and our children. Comes the Rambam and says, look in source number 8, the Rambam says in this Maimer Tchias HaMeisim at the end of chapter 2, says the Rambam, Shedivrei Torah yesh lohem Nigla v'Nistar. The words of Torah have the revealed side to them and the hidden side. Velo zeh yikru haNistar sisre de Torah. That's why the hidden part is called the secrets of Torah, because they are hidden. Where do we see that the Rambam was a champion in Nigla the Torah, in the revealed part of Torah? Let's go to source number 9. We're going to read a little bit from the introduction of the Rambam to his Sefer. What does the Rambam write in the big introduction? Look at source number 9. Ubizman hazen, and this time after he gives the whole introduction of the history and the genealogy of Torah, how it started with Moshe Rabbeinu and all the 40 generations, etc. Says the Rambam, Ubizman hazeh tokfu tzaris eseris. And in these times there were many tzaris, many hardships. Ve'ov the chochmas chachamenu, and the knowledge was lost from our big chachamim. Because as we know that the Talmud, the Gemara has Bavli, the Babylonian, Yerushalmi, Sifra, Sifri, Toseftes. These are all portions that belong to the Talmud. Shehein tzrichin das rechava. That you need a very vast knowledge and a great mind to be able to contain all of that and understand all of that. And therefore, since it's getting lost, says the Rambam in the Akdama, umipnei zeh, therefore, ani Moshe ben Maimun Asfardi. Therefore, I, Moshe ben Maimun the Sfardi, I took it upon myself, v'ra'isi lechaber dvarim hamizbarerim mikol elu achiburim. I decided to clarify from all these sfarim, from all these works, be'inyan ha'aser v'amuter, what is permitted, what is not permitted, hatome ve'hatoyer, what is impure, what is pure, im sh'arin yonei ha'Torah, and also all the other laws of Torah, at sheyiyu kol hadinim gluyin lakotan ve'lagadol. So this way, all the laws will be very clear to the young, to the old. And not only that, somebody's going to say, yeah, but we still have to learn all the rest. Says the Rambam, a very, very radical statement. This chibur, this work that I'm going to put together, will include in itself everything that you need to know in the oral part of Torah. And again, we're not going to be discussing now all the details about this, but it's an unbelievable statement what the Rambam is saying here, that he called it Mishnah Torah, etc. But we see over here clearly that the Rambam wrote in Nigla the Torah, in the revealed part of Torah, a masterpiece that is second to none. The Rambam also wrote in Nistar the Torah, in the hidden part of Torah. Where do we see it? Go source number 10. First of all, in his Rambam, in Yad HaChazak, in the Sefer of Halachas, how does he start? Perek Aleph, the first chapter. Yesoid HaYesoides V'Amud HaChokmas. What is the foundation of all the knowledge required? Leida sheyesho motzi rishon, to know that there is a first being which is the Eibishter, but not just to know, to understand it. And the Rambam continues 2 chapters, and then at the end in Halacha Yud Aleph, what does he say? That dvarim elu she'amarnu be'inyan zeh, what we discussed about this subject, which are the toughest subjects to understand in the Rambam. It's like a drop in the sea of what we really need to explain. And these two chapters that I explained to you, you know what that is called, says the Rambam. This is what's called in the language of the outside. It's called Maise Merkava, the story of the Merkava, of the chariot which is up in Olam Habriya, in the spiritual worlds. There are two parts. There's one which is called Maise Merkava, and then the other two chapters that the Rambam will discuss is Maise Bereshis, the physical world, what it looks like. So we see that the Rambam first made an emphasis that the first two chapters he discusses Maise Merkava, Torah Nistar. And besides, for these two chapters, the Rambam wrote the famous sefer called Moreh Nevuchim, which is the guide for the perplexed. Look in your source number 11, how the Rambam says in the Akdama. What does he say in the introduction of this Moreh Nevuchim? Moreh HaNevuchim, Kavanas HaMaimer Zeh. What is the purpose of this whole book that I'm writing, Moreh HaNevuchim? Lehoir ish baldas, to be able to wake up, to make a note to this person who is what's called today religious. And he is very complete in his faith and his conduct. But he also learned what the Chochmas HaPhilosophem, what the philosophers have to say. And he knows what they're talking about. And now the brain has pulled him to a certain side. And I'm not quoting everything that the Rambam says, because it's a beautiful long Akdama. And now he's all mixed up and perplexed, and he doesn't know what to do. And Maise Merkava hu Chachma Elikus. And the whole concept of Maise Merkava is godly knowledge. And therefore, says the Rambam, I'm going to explain it to you. Till you'll understand all those Psukim and all those places in the Nevi'im and the prophets that they seem to be not very clear understood. I will explain it to you until you won't have any questions on godliness. So we see here very clearly that the Rambam wrote Sfarim in Nigla the Torah, and he wrote in Pnimius Torah. So to the Alter Rebbe, let's go to source number 12. What do we see that the Alter Rebbe wrote in Nigla the Torah? The Alter Rebbe wrote a famous Shulchan Aruch Harav. There's nothing more Nigla than that. And we look at the introduction of the Bnei HaMechaber, the children of the Alter Rebbe. You'll see that there's a very close similarity to the Akdama of the Rambam to his sefer. What did the Bnei HaMechaber write? The children of the Alter Rebbe, what did they write? And because the needs of the Yidden are many, and therefore they don't have the time, the knowledge. They don't have the time and the mood to go into the sea of the Talmud and the Parshios, to know the final ruling on every halacha, to be able to resolve, to determine, to establish in between the Parshios, how to actually come to a conclusion, to a halacha, because we see that there are different opinions all over the place. Says the Bnei HaMechaber that the Alter Rebbe was given the job by the Mezritcher Magid to do this job of preparing halacha properly on the order of the Shulchan Aruch, Erachaim, Yeredeya, etc. And the Mezritcher Magid he chose in our father, the Rebbe, the Alter Rebbe, to bring out the nutshell of each halacha. So we see here clearly that again, just like the Rambam went through the whole Talmud to be able to pull out the halachas, so did the Alter Rebbe by the behest of the Mezritcher Magid. And of course, the Alter Rebbe wrote in Pnimius Torah, in the hidden part of Torah, and we're going to see similarities to the Rambam's Moreh Nevuchim, because in chapter 13, in source number 13, we quote from the Hakdama of the Alter Rebbe to the Tanya, the introduction. The Alter Rebbe starts as follows: Aleichem ishim ekra. To my dear people, I'm calling out. The people are used to saying, it's very interesting over here. Normally, when we have a choice between seeing or hearing, which one is more effective? Obviously, when you see something, it's more effective. Here comes Alter Rebbe, says the opposite. That it's not the same hearing from somebody than reading in a book. What's better, to hear from the Rebbe or to read it in a book, in a sefer? Obviously, to hear from the Rebbe. So in this case, hearing is better than reading. So in other words, Alter Rebbe is explaining over here, why am I writing a book? It's worse. The Chassidim would rather hear from me. So the Alter Rebbe explains later that it's very hard to speak to everyone, so therefore he's writing in his book, and the book will be just as if you're hearing. But I would just wanted to point out that this is one of the things that our generation was zoiche, that we have both advantages. Those days they had a choice, either to hear it from the Rebbe or to read it from a book. They'd rather hear from the Rebbe, but they can't always hear from the Rebbe because they're far away. Today we have something which is called a video. A video is something you could hear and see at the same time, because you could hear it at your own pace. The Rebbe could be sitting in America, you could be sitting at the other end of the world, and you could hear and see the Rebbe at the same time. So we are very, very privileged. But anyways, in the time of the Alter Rebbe, there was a problem, and therefore, what happens if a person is very confused in his avodas Hashem and he doesn't know what to do? He's like going in the dark, so he needs help. And even in the special Sfarim that do explain things, says the Alter Rebbe, it's very hard to find in Torah the part that really hits the person exactly to the point. Says the Alter Rebbe that that even in halacha, which is something much simpler than discussing the spiritual godliness, we see that there's a lot of machlokes between the Tanoim and the Amoraim, etc. And it's hard to get to the conclusion. How much more so, says the Alter Rebbe, it's so much harder in the hidden part of Torah, Nistar. So, how is it possible to write a sefer? So, a sefer in Nigla is very hard. Imagine in Nistar the Torah. Says the Alter Rebbe, I know very well my customers, I know my chassidim, but because they all came to me and they all discussed all their issues, they discussed with me the issues that they have in their avodas Hashem, which is in the heart, which is something so pnimi, something so inner. And therefore, therefore my mouth, my tongue is going to be like a pen in these books. Which means that Alter Rebbe is telling the Chassidim, I will write for you in Chassidus, and it's going to be written, it's not as good as hearing, I will make it in Mirz Hashem, that it will be just as good as hearing. So we see the greatness of what the Sefer Tanya is, that when you actually learn the Tanya, it's mamish like going into Yechidus, into a private audience with the Alter Rebbe and discussing all our issues, because the Alter Rebbe addresses all the issues that we have. That's the third. The fourth thing, we're going to go now, the opposition. The opposition of Yidden to the Rambam and the opposition of Yidden to the Alter Rebbe. We're going to see that it's going to be almost exactly the same. And here's the source. Go to source number 14. This is a letter from the Alter Rebbe. It's printed in a sefer called Igros Kodesh of the Alter Rebbe. This is the sefer that I'm holding here, Igros Kodesh Kvei Kedushas Admor Hazaken, and it's a letter number 34. In here, the Alter Rebbe says very briefly, he's telling the Chassidim, this is in the year Tov Kuf Nun Zayin, Tov Kuf Nun Ches, right before he went to jail. So it was a very tough time for Chassidim, and Chassidim were having many, many problems. And Alter Rebbe was trying to calm them down. And what he says in this letter is really amazing. He says as follows, source number 14. And regarding that famous time that they burnt the famous sefer, which sefer did they burn? The Bisnagdim at that time, on Erev Pesach, when they went to burn the chametz, they publicly burnt the sefer Tzavos HaRivosh. Tzavos HaRivosh is the Reb Yisrael Baal Shem. The Baal Shem Tov didn't write any Sfarim. His Talmidim wrote the Sfarim. So the first sefer that came out in those days of Teves of the Baal Shem Tov was Tzavos HaRivosh. So the Misnagdim, we're not going to go now into the details where, what, and who, but one of the biggest Rabbanim then made a whole thing that at of Pesach, when they went to burn the chametz, they also burnt the Sefer Tzavos HaRivosh. And the Chassidim just were mortified by that. Says the Alter Rebbe, Lo lochem lo riv es riva Baal Shem Tov Zatzalala, ulo eire medonim chas v'shalom. It's not your job to take over the covet of the Baal Shem Tov. The Baal Shem Tov will take care of himself. Don't get involved. This is not the way that Hashem wants you to conduct. Yeah? What you have to do is you have to just continue learning Chassidus, teaching Chassidus, and those things the Rebbe will take care of. Then says the Alter Rebbe, to you it's a new thing. Never heard of such a thing. Taking a Yiddish sefer and burn it. Never heard of such a thing. Says the Alter Rebbe, no. This is something that was already in the past. Go back to history. Who do we have greater than somebody who was mamish like Moshe Rabbeinu in his generation? Who is that? The Rambam, Rabbeinu Moshe ben Maimon. Asher be'artze b'Sfarad, that in his country in Sfard, which Sfard is really all the countries where the Rambam went to, Spain, down to Morocco, Mitzrayim, etc. Godal b'Shem Tov, Holech v'Godal me'oid. His name was the top, the greatest that can be. Ad shebechayev hoyu omer benusach HaKadosh. The Yidden, when they said Kaddish, what did they say? In your time and in your lifetime. They didn't just say in the lifetime of all the Yidden. They said the lifetime of our teacher, Rabbeinu Moshe, the Rambam, and of all the Yidden. Why did they say that? Because they saw the honor, they saw his holiness, they saw his chassidus, and therefore that's what they felt of the Rambam. In the far countries that they did not see the Rambam and they didn't see his honor, they felt that he was a heretic, he was a koifer in Torah, and they burned his Sfarim. Which Sfarim? The first Sefer of the Rambam, which is Sefer in the Sefer Ayad in Halacha, the ones that we quoted before the first chapters, and they burnt them in the streets. Because there were some people who thought they're very smart. They read what the Rambam writes in Hilchos Tshuva, and they couldn't understand, that it didn't even enter their mind, that the reason why they don't understand the Rambam is because they just are very limited in their knowledge. As the Ramban later finally started explaining the Rambam to all these people. But when time took its toll, and as we say, time heals, begamsin osam, and also their hatred to the Rambam, vatitzmach emes meyeretz, and then finally the truth was revealed. Veyodu kol Yisrael ki Moshe emes, v'terase emes. They knew that Moshe is true and his Torah is true. V'koyi yelanu b'mheira b'yamein amen. So will be with us in Yirtzeh Hashem. So we see here a very interesting connection between the Rambam, that the Rambam was the top, and still in all, he went through a very tough time. They were burnt his Sfarim. And so the Alter Rebbe says, we're going through the same thing. Don't worry, the truth will prevail. Another issue is their names. The name of the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe. The Rambam was the Rambam's name, Rabbi Moshe ben Maimon, but we call him Rambam. In Rambam is Reish Mem Beis Mem. So we have two mems here. We have the first mem, which is called a mem psucha, open mem, and we have the second mem, which is a mem stuma, a closed mem, the a schloss mem. What's the difference between an open mem and a schloss mem? Let's look at this. Gemara, look at source number 15. The Gemara says in Shabbos, Daf Kuf Daled Amud Aleph, Amr le Rabban Rabbi Shua ben Levi. The Rabbanan said to Rabbi Shua ben Levi, Osu dardiki hoyin lebeit medrash. There were some little children that came to this medrash today. They said some things that since the time of Yeshua bin Nun, they didn't learn such pshat. What did they learn? They learned Aleph Beis. But they explained the whole Aleph Beis, what the word Aleph means. Aleph means learning. The word Beis, Gimel, Dalid. They went through the whole Aleph Beis explaining what it is. I'm not going to go through it because we don't have the time. But when they came to Mem, they said as follows. Mem Psucha, Mem Stuma. Then we have an open Mem and a closed Mem. What is it? Maimer Pasuach, Maimer Sosum. There's open sayings in the Torah, and there are closed ones. What does that mean? Open and closed. Says Rashi, Yesh Dvarim Shanos Nitan Reshus L'Doirshon. There are some things that you have the permission Everyone could learn them. There are certain things that have to be closed. They're supposed to be hidden. For example, just like what? Maisa Merkava, as we explained before. So we see here that there's a concept of open Torah, closed Torah, Nigla the Torah, Primus the Torah, and this is what the Rambam has in his name, 2 mems. And the same thing we find by the Alter Rebbe. By the way, in source number 16, you have something which is called Shuvas Subiurim, where the Rebbe wrote a beautiful essay. And I'm not going to discuss it now because we have a separate shir for that, regarding Akavya ben Mahalal Eloimer. There's a Mishnah in Pirkei Avos. There's a whole story that the previous Rebbe has with one of the big Chassidim at the time of the Alter Rebbe. His name was Baruch Mordechai Babruiske, and he explained what Akavya ben Mahalal Eloimer, and over there the Rebbe explains the whole concept of names. How do we look at names? And therefore the same thing we have with the Alter Rebbe. What was the Alter Rebbe's name? His name was Shneur. What does Shneur mean? 2 lights. Where do we see that Shneur means 2 lights? Look at source number 17. This was the Yam Shel Shloime. Yam Shel Shloime, he is one of the big Mefarshim on the Gemara, the Marshal, the Shloime Luria. He was also a couple 100 years ago. So he writes in Gittin and Perik Daled in Siman Chavav. He writes as follows. And I met my Zaidi, Harav Reb Menachem Tzion. Hoyol Bain, he had a son. B'Shem Aviv, Morena Rav Meir. The name of his father was Meir. B'Shem Chamov, and the name of his shver, of his father-in-law, Reb Uri. Right? And one was Meir, one was Uri. Vayom Muchulakim b'Kriyas Haben. They had a son. They didn't know what to do. Should they call him Meir or should they call him Uri? And what did they decide to do? V'Kar'u Shnei. They called him Shnei. Koloimar, what does it mean? Shnei Oir, 2 lights. Meir hu Oir, ve'Uri hu Oir. Meir is a concept of light. Uri is a concept of light. They both come to the word Oir. So Shnei Oir means 2 lights. What are the 2 lights of the Alter Rebbe? So here we have a beautiful letter from the Rebbe's father, Likutei Sichos, who was a big Mekubal, the Rebbe's father, who have the big schus of being named after him. He writes in a letter to the Rebbe regarding the Alter Rebbe. He writes as follows in Igros Amud Reish Yud Ches. This is your source number 18. Bederek klal Shneier hu beis pe'omim Oir. The Shneier is 2 lights. Roimez al beis b'chinas Oir, Oir makif ve'Oir pnimi. It represents 2 types of lights. In Kabbalah, in Chassidus, it explains that there are 2 types of lights. Oir makif, a light which encompasses, which is very general. All over it is the same place, like the light of the Shemesh, for example. And then you have a Oir pnimi, a light that penetrates. Uba Torah, Eilu habeis b'chinas Oir. In Torah, these are the 2 types of lights. Torah is called Torah Oir. So we have 2 lights. Habeis b'chinas the Torah. Nistar the Torah, v'Nigla the Torah. The hidden part of Torah and the revealed part of Torah. Kabbalah, v'Nigla. What's known as Kabbalah, the hidden part, and Nigla, the revealed. V'ischabrusam yachad habeis Oir. How do we blend the 2? What does that mean? Hu inyan gilu Oir Chassidus. This is what Chassidus is. What Alter Rebbe did, Shnei Oir, he blended Nigla with Nistar together. Because Oir Chassidus is the Nistar, the Torah. It's not Kabbalah, it's Nistar. Hasoidus hayoser amukim. These are the deepest secrets. Yusku b'afshastoton leseichel al derech k'mei hasaga de Nigla de Torah. Just like Nigla de Torah is very simple to learn. When you learn about shoyr shenogach as a para, a cow that hit, ox that hit a cow, which is something very clear. The same thing that Alter Rebbe brought down atzilus bria, the concept of the spiritual worlds, all down in a very clear way. Mashenkin Kabbalah, says the Rebbe's father, Kabbalah in itself, it's not something that could be comprehended with the human mind. What does Kabbalah mean? Received. It's something that you received, you believe, it's a faith. What is the concept of Chassidus? It's higher than Kabbalah and Nigla. That's why Chassidus get blended to that even the secrets should be able to be understood through in a revealed way, just like Nigla. So now we see the 2 names, Rambam and Shnei Oir, they both represent both Teves. The 6th issue that we find a common denominator is, why did they write the Sefer? What does the Rambam write in the beginning of his Sefer? In source number 19, look at the Akdam of the Rambam, the introduction of the Rambam. The Rambam writes, "Tok fu atzaris yiseidus," being that it's a very tough time for Yidden. V'doch ko hasho es hakoil, and time became very tough. Ve'ov the chochmas, and the people They don't have the time to dwell in Chachma of Torah. Lefika chaysam apirushim, and therefore a lot of the explanations that are given on Torah, niskashu b'yameinu ve'ein mevin yonyanem karoi. There are many who don't understand them properly. The Gemara itself for sure is very hard to understand it. It needs a lot of knowledge and understanding and time. Therefore, says the Rambam, I shaked my clothing. In other words, I got to work. And what did I decide to do? And I made very clear from all these sources, and here's the words, that it should be something clear and short, to the point. This way the whole the whole oral Torah should be clear, prepared in front of everyone, without any questions. Not that you have one opinion says this, one opinion says that. It should be a very clear something, halachas. The Alter Rebbe in number 20, over here also in Dagdama, the Bnei Mechaber, we also find, as you can see, that the Alter Rebbe also, they start, just like the Rambam started, the times were tough, and by the Yidden also it's a tough, and to be able to be Machriya, in most places there are different opinions. I'm not reading the whole thing because it's basically almost a repetition of the Agdam of the Rambam. And there was a tough to find someone. Mishma, I'm holding the 5th line in source number 20. Mishmaya askimo. From heaven they were maskim. Limtzei isha sheruach elikim boy, to find someone who has divine inspiration. Lehavinu lehilis halacha brura, to bring out a very clear halacha, masun umasik aliba de hilchas halachas betaimein beloshen tzach, in a very, very clear language, to be able to bring out the final pinnacle of all this analysis in Torah, to bring out the halachas in a psak halacha mizbarer, in a very, very clear halacha. So we see that what's the reason why they made the book? Because before them, things weren't clarified. There was a lot of machlokes in Torah. They brought it out very clearly. The 7th point that we have over here, the common denominator between the Alter Rebbe and the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe, is in the beginning of their Sefer. The Rambam, how does he start off his Sefer? Look at source number 21. The Rambam starts off, that the foundation of everything is to know that there's a God. The first 4 words, if you notice, Yesoid HaYesoidas V'Amud HaChachmas, the first 4 letters are Yud, Kei, Vav, Kei, which is Hashem's name. The Rambam had a grandson, Reb David HaNogid, and he writes, and I'm quoting in source number 21, Mishne Torah Shechiber Skeni HaRambam, the Sefer that my Zayde the Rambam wrote, Maschil B'Shem HaMfeir, starts with the name of the Eibishter, Yud, Kei, Vav, Kei. This is how the Rambam starts. The Alter Rebbe, look at number 22. What are the first words in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch? Yehuda ben Tema Omer. Yehuda ben Tema says, what's so special about the name Yehuda? Look at source number 23, says the Gemara in Saita. Yehuda shekidei shem shamayim befarhesia. Yehuda, that he was mekadesh, he sanctified Hashem's name in public. Nikra kuloi al shmei shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu. He is named after the Eibishter's name. Says Rashi, where do we see that Yehuda is the name of the Eibishter? Says Rashi, Shem ben Arba Oisius Kolul Bishmei Shel Yehuda. The name of the Eibishter, which is made up of 4 letters, Yud, Kei, Vav, Kei, it's all found in the name of Yehuda. So therefore we see that Yehuda has the name of the Eibishter, Yud, Kei, Vav, Kei. So just like the Rambam started off his Sefer Yud, Kei, Vav, Kei, so too did the Alter Rebbe in his Shulchan Aruch. The 8th point between the two is the teichen of the Sfarim, the teichen of their books. The Rambam is in Nigla, with Nigla the Torah. What is his main point that he wants to bring out? That the whole world, the whole purpose of the world is because of the Eibishter. So look at source number 24. How does the Rambam start the Sefer, as we mentioned? Look at source 24. The Rambam starts, what's the foundation of everything? Leida she'esha motzirishin. That a person must know that there's an Eibishter. Vehu mamtzikol nimtza, and he's the one that creates everything and he makes everything. Vechol hanimtzoi mishamayim va'oretz u'mashe b'neihem, and everything which exists in the world, le'nimtzu elam amita simote, are only existing because of the Eibishter's existence. So we see that the whole world is because of the Eibishter. How does the Alter Rebbe start his Sefer? Look at source number 25, the beginning of the Alter Rebbe, Klal Gadol B'Torah. There's a very important rule in the whole Torah. Shivisi Hashem lenegdi samid, that a person always have to have the Eibishter in front of him. And therefore, you have to be as kanomer, you have to be strong like a leopard, kal kanesher, light like a eagle, rotz katzvi, run like a deer, giber koari, strong like a lion, las esretzayin avicha shebashamayim, to do the will of the Eibishter. So we see even the animals, a leopard, a eagle, a tzvi, what are they here for? To show how the whole world belongs to the Eibishter, which is exactly what the Rambam did. This is in their Nigla for him. In the Nistar, also we find again the same thing. Look at source number 26. The Rambam in the beginning, as we mentioned before already, that Vinyone Arba Prakim Elu, what are these four first chapters? They discuss Maise Merkava, Maise Bereshis, etc. Says the Rambam, Ve'afal Pishe Gdoili Yisrael Hayu, Bechachamim Gdoilim Hayu, even though the Yidden had very big Chachamim. Loi Kulam Hayu Bem Koyach Leidau Lehasi Kol Advorim Al Buryon. And not, they weren't able to understand these things properly. As the Chachamim say, Omru Chachamim, Davar Gadol, Maise Merkava. What's a big deal, a big thing to understand? Maise Merkava, the spiritual worlds. And therefore the Rambam came and explained the spiritual worlds. This is what the teichen of his Sfarim is. And now the same thing in Sefer Meir Nevuchim, your source number 27. The Rambam explains, why did he write the guide for the perplexed? What's the purpose of this whole Sefer, this book? Lehoir ish baldas, to take a person who is following their religion, but he's still perplexed. And he still lives with the other unfortunate thoughts. Kavana Shnia, what's the second purpose? To explain those parables that are explained in the Nevi'im and the prophets. The person who doesn't understand very well, he thinks that the pasuk is talking in a very literal sense, and he's going to have a very big problem, a big perplexing. And therefore the Rambam wrote this Sefer to be able to explain it to him. So we see that even the teichen of the Sfarim, of the Rambam, discusses the concept of explaining godliness to someone who is in a mevucha. So to the Alter Rebbe, look at source number 28. What does the Rambam write in the Alter Rebbe write in his Akdama, in his introduction? If they are mixed up, they're going in darkness, they are like just they're perplexed. Says the Alter Rebbe, the Sefer HaTanya is all answers to questions that people ask. And in them, person will find relief and a good advice. Everything which is hard for them in Avodas Hashem, in their worship to the Eibishter. The ninth thing is the Psukim that they bring, as you can see in source number 29. The Rambam, how does he start his whole Sefer with the pasuk Mishoich Chazdecha L'Yodecha V'Tzidkashcha Yisrael? In Meir Nevuchim he has three psukim. The first one is Hoidi'eni derech zu eilech ki alecha nesasi nafshi Aleichem ishim ekra v'koilim el b'nei adam. Basically what it means, let me know your way. And also on the other hand, how he calls out to other people. And the third pasuk is Hat oznecho shma divrei chachamim v'libcha toshes l'dai, to listen to the chachamim and put your heart, let daiti, to my knowledge. This is how the Rambam uses these psukim. When we look at source 31, which is the Tanya in the beginning, we'll see that the Alter Rebbe also uses the same expression, almost the same psukim. First of all, the Alter Rebbe says, Levi heitev eichu karav me'od, to explain how he's so close. The concept of Avodas Hashem could be so close. Just like the Rambam wrote the pasuk, Mishoich chazdecha l'yodecha, bring close your chesed to your knowledge. Then the Alter Rebbe says that he is going to explain it b'derech harucha uktzara, in a long, short way. I'm not going to go now and explain the whole thing, but it's the same expression that the Rambam uses, derech zu eilech. And then the Alter Rebbe starts, Aleichem ishim ekra, to you people I call out. And that's the same pasuk that the Rambam writes in Meir Nevuchim. And then the Alter Rebbe says, Shimu elai reit v'tzedek, which is the last pasuk that the Rambam also brings in Meir Nevuchim, Hat oz necho shma. So we see a very close connection between the two. And ultimately is that 10th thing. There are many more. I just picked 10 because this is as much as we could fit into today's shir, and this is only an introduction that as we said, the Histalkus is around Chav Dalet Teves. They're both in the same week, so they usually come out in Parsha Shmois, Va'era, Boy, in those 3 parshas. And what do those 3 parshas talk about? The Yidden, how they were in Mitzrayim, and they were in Tzaris, just like the Rambam and Alter Rebbe write in the Akdam of their Sfarim, that what happened, the Yidden had many Tzaris and they couldn't understand Torah properly, and that's exactly the same thing that happened with the Yidden when they were in Mitzrayim. What happened? Let's look at source number 32. The Rambam in Hilchos Avodah Zarah, Perik Aleph, what does he say? At the end of Perik Aleph, that he goes through the whole history, how finally the Rebbe came to Avram Avinu, I taught him the Torah, and then Yitzchak and Yaakov, etc. When they came to Mitzrayim, there was a problem, says the Rambam. When the Yidden were a long time in Mitzrayim, and then they were going to learn from the Egyptians. And that root that Avram Avinu planted was about to be uprooted. And the children of Yaakov were going to go back to the mistakes of the world, that there's a world and there's no Eibishter. Because the Rebbe loves us, also Moshe Rabbeinu shlachai, and the Rebbe sent Moshe Rabbeinu. So we see that what caused the Rebbe to send Moshe Rabbeinu, all the tzaras and the fact that they were forgetting Torah, which is the same reason why the Rambam and Alter Rebbe wrote this for him. What did Moshe Rabbeinu do? Let's look at source number 33 in Parshas Va'era, Perik Vav Pasuk Tes. The Yidden did not listen to Moshe because they were so engrossed in their gullahs. They were such tough, like the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe write, etc. Right? What did Moshe Rabbeinu do? Let's look at source number 34 in Parshas Vayera in the beginning. The Rebbe still tells Moshe Rabbeinu, Emer livnei Yisrael ani Hashem. What does he come to the Yidden and tell them? I am the Eibishter. Just like the Rambam writes, what's the main thing to know? You say there's Muda Chachma, Leida Shiyesh Shemotzirishin, to know that there's an Eibishter. And the same the Alter Rebbe writes in his Akdamim. I'm going to take you out from the pain, the work, the toil of the Egyptians, which is exactly what the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe explained that they wanted, that they did, to take the Yidden out of their tzaris, even material. And then you will know the knowledge of the Eibishter, which is exactly what the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe did. And it's very interesting that we find a very interesting remes in the Parshios to the Rambam. These are the first Parshios that talk about Moshe Rabbeinu. Shmois Va'era Boy talk about Moshe. And this is the Rambam himself was Moshe. And in Parsha Boy, we have the Rebbe that tells Moshe Rabbeinu that I'm going to make plagues on Paray. Why? Leman revois moifsai beret Mitzrayim. That I should be able to show many of my moifsim, of my miracles, on the Egyptians. The 4 words, revois moifsai beret Mitzrayim, the first letters spell reish mem beis mem, which is the word Rambam. So too, Parshas Va'era. What is the name of Va'era? It's Vav Aleph Reish Aleph, which is the letters, same letters as Oir Aleph. Oir means light. Aleph is the Rosh Teves of the word Oir, is the first letter of the word Oir. So it's when I write Aleph with a little apostrophe on top, what does that mean? It's a short version of the word Oir. So it's interesting that one time in the word Va'era you have the full word Oir, Aleph Vav Reish Oir, and the other one time you have it a little hidden, because it represents the 2 oiros of the Alter Rebbe. The oir which is revealed, the Nigla the Torah, and the Aleph which is the oir which is hidden. And so on, this goes on and on and on. So basically we see, and this is the end of part 1 of our series, of the connection of the Alter Rebbe and the Rambam. So basically what we discussed today is their Histalkus, they passed away, they're very close in proximity. What they did in order to help Yidden, Begashmis and Beruchnius, was very common denominator. Their Torah, they wrote in Nigla the Torah and in Nistar the Torah. The 4th thing, the opposition, they burnt their Sfarim, and then later they turned out to be correct. Their name, the Rambam has the Mem and the Mem, which is Maimer Pasuach, Maimer Sasum. The Alter Rebbe has Shnei Oir. The reason why they wrote their Sefer, the beginning of their Sfarim have the same Psukim, they have the same Hakdama. The Teichen of their Sfarim are the same, that the contents, the Psukim in the beginning of the Sfarim are the same, and ultimately the connection to the Parsha. So I hope this is at least enough of an introduction to our future shiurim of the common denominator between the Rambam and the Alter Rebbe. Any questions? Excellent. Did the Rambam learn Kabbalah? We say that the Rambam writes so much on Nistar. Did he also learn Kabbalah? Well, there's a whole letter from the Rebbe about that. I believe it's in the Igros for sure. It's there, and because someone asked the Rebbe that question, and the Rebbe brings that the Rebbe Maharash, the fourth Rebbe, told the Rebbe Rashab, the fifth Rebbe, they were learning Meir Nevuchim, and there was a whole issue whether the Rambam learned Kabbalah, because it seems that the Rebbe Chaim Vital says that the Rambam did not learn Kabbalah, although he knew Chachmas Oemes. But the Migdal Oiz, who is one of the Mefarshim on the Rambam, he does write that the Rambam did learn Kabbalah. And those that say that he didn't learn Kabbalah because at that time it was at a certain time that you couldn't give Rosh Hashanah, etc. But the bottom line is, yes, that the Rambam learned Chachmas Oemes, and perhaps in the shiurim when we will discuss the Rambam, we will discuss this whole subject and bring all the sources of where the Rambam learned all this Pnimius HaTorah, because the Rabbeim did have a special kvias in learning Sfarim, like even Meir HaNevuchim they used to learn. And the Ragachover even took out halachas from Meir HaNevuchim. So obviously, this was something that the Rambam did learn, the Nistar Torah, without any question. There's plenty more to talk about this, by the way. Now is not the place, but even by the Rebbe we find this whole connection with the Rambam. The first sefer that the Rebbe wrote is the sefer called Hayom Yom. And besides that, today there's a young man, his name is Rabbi Zelikson, and he was able to find how the whole Hayom Yom is written according to the Seder of the Rambam. But right in the beginning, the first four words of the Sefer Hayom Yom are, the Rebbe writes, Yom Hisvadus v'Kabbalas Achlatos Teves. That Yutas Kislev, this Hayom Yom starts from the day of Yutas Kislev. So it starts with the words Yom Hisvadus v'Achlatos Teves. The first four letters are Yud, K, Vav, K. And even before, where he quotes a letter from the Rebbe Rashab, he starts with Yutas Kislev, Hachag asher podo b'sholem nafsheinu, ve'oir v'chayis nafsheinu nitan lonu, hayoim hazeh hu rosh hashanu ledach. It's also Yud, K, Vav, K. And we find many, many similarities, but this we will discuss already on a different occasion.